Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breaking Points. I'm very excited about this show. We actually have a little bit of a global flair here, crossing 3 different continents with the guests that are going to be joining me. So first off, very special guest, Saagar is going to join for the A block to talk about the very latest with regard to tariffs. No baby yet, but he is very busy and occupied with, preparing for the big day. So he's going to join us off the top. Then we're going to be joined by special guest host, special celebrity guest host, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Glenn Greenwald. I want to get his take off the top of just, overall impressions of the Trump administration. And I've got a bunch of news I want to dive into with him. This Houthi strike on the Israeli Ben Gurion airport, the boycotts bill that actually was pulled, a very rare APAC L here. So that's an interesting one to get into. There was a big deep dive into John Fetterman's mental and physical health. Almost appears like another Democratic cover-up of his specific situation. His staffers are speaking out, so a lot to get into there. Claudia Sheinbaum is hitting back at Trump after he offered to send our military in to Mexico to fight the cartels. She is saying no thanks to that. At the same time, the Trump administration is weighing designating suspected gang and cartel members as enemy combatants, potentially another path for them to attempt to deport people with no due process. So very interested to get Glenn's take on all of those things. Also going to have a journalist join us from Australia. Australia has just sort of followed in the footsteps of Canada with their election results. The Liberal, the center-left party coming from behind to really secure a landslide victory. The prime minister there, Tony Albanese, he was reelected. His opponent, actually, again, like Canada, not only lost the overall party election, but also lost his own seat. And America and reaction, backlash to Trump's policies has a lot to do with that. So really looking forward to getting the view from down under there. Let's go ahead and get to it. Very excited to announce a special edition of Breaking Points. Let's put this up on the screen, guys. We've got the Baby Points edition. Saagar is able to join us for the top of the show here as he navigates his life heading into a very, very important day. It is lovely to see you, my friend.
Thank you for the special graphic. That
was all
honestly,
Griffin.
I needed that. Thank you to the audience. And I just want to say this before we even get started. Thank you to the whole team, to everybody. It has been just an absolute roller coaster over here in the Ingetti household as we're dealing with the medical system and everything else. And just knowing that the team has my back and everybody else are producing a great show for everybody. It's incredible. So seriously, thank you, especially the premium subscribers and others who enable this. And I am very glad to be able to talk about tariffs and specifically about baby strollers. It's a very relevant thing in my life right now. And so I think that's a good hook.
Yeah, what was Trump's quote? He was like, everything's going down except the things that they carry the babies in or something like that.
Yeah.
By which he means strollers.
Right. Today is May 5th, actually, where one of the largest stroller companies here in the United States called UPPAbaby will actually be enacting all of its new price hikes. It's caused mass panic amongst a lot of my friends and others who are having children. So, yeah, it's really great. And in addition, I'm sure that we'll play the clip of Trump. We don't know the gender, Jillian and I, of what we're having. But if it is a girl, I guess I will only be able to buy, 3 beautiful baby dolls. And
2 or 3,
because
2 or 3.
Little girls notoriously do not need more than 2 or 3 little dolls. But yeah, okay, let's get to it.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Trump children, they didn't have any excess. Surely,
yeah, of course not. They never had
didn't have more than they needed.
Have you seen the photo of Melania with literally a gilded baby stroller? So yeah, It must be nice. It must be nice not to have to worry about these things. We are currently, I mentioned this last time, Krystal, I'll say it to you, Jillian and I are spending our free time researching diaper supply chains just to make sure that we're going to be able to have access. That's just a really great addition to our new family life.
It's not like you had anything else to worry about, Saagar.
That's right.
Plenty of time on your hands, no other problems or challenges to worry about. So I'm sure that's how you wanted to spend your time. All right, let's get to, we've got a couple of interesting comments here from Trump from this interview he did with Kristen Welker over at NBC. This first one where he seems to indicate, sort of downplay the possibility of a recession and what the impact of the recession would be. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
I want to know what you think about that. Are you comfortable with the country potentially dipping into a recession for a period of time if you are able to achieve your long-term goals.
Well, you say some people on Wall Street say, well, I tell you something else. Some people on Wall Street say that we're going to have the greatest economy in history. Why don't you talk about them? Because some people on Wall Street say this is the greatest thing that ever happened.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at, though. It's the same question.
Yeah, there are many people on Wall Street say this is going to be the greatest windfall ever happened.
And that's my question.
Remember
the
this.
long term. Yeah. Is it okay in the short term to have a recession?
This. Look, everything's okay. What we are, I said, this is a transition period. I think we're going to do fantastic.
The Trump economy.
It partially is right now, and I really mean this. I think the good parts are the Trump economy, and the bad parts are the Biden economy, because he's done a terrible job. He did a terrible job on everything.
Your thoughts, Saagar?
Yeah, we have the Trump economy or the good parts of the Biden stock market, and actually it will remain the Biden stock market until it starts to go up again. It's just preposterous now at this point. It is pretty crazy to be almost a month, more than a month actually now at this point, removed from Liberation Day, and for all of us to actually try and take a step back and realize like what has now happened. We have a massive like market volatility. In fact, though, the U.S. economy is suffering one of the greatest like supply shocks in American history, almost comparable to COVID, except this is a self-induced supply shock. And I know we've been warning about the shipping drop and how that will all manifest in terms of shelves and all of that. And that's just going to be ever present here because it's going to take months for us to see some of this. And already we're seeing this like crazy run on iPhones, on strollers, on other importable goods or imported goods, like things like televisions, consumer electronics. But what about 6 months from now? I'm also thinking about the fact that we're in May. So, 6 months from now, whenever we're in the holiday period of whenever people are going to be shopping for gifts, think about Cyber Monday and all these other things, Q4, one of the most important quarters in all of retail. Just consider, what those recession comments and how they can come back to bite you. It is also fascinating because Trump simultaneously is a student of like some political history. He recently was talking about and texted Newt Gingrich about read my lips, no new taxes. This was the infamous line that sunk George H.W. Bush. I mean, if you don't even think about your political fortune, somewhat in the future for the Democrats in the midterm elections, it's very obvious that recession clip and others of him talking about this are going to be massively impactful for Republican chances. I know that there's a take out there that Trump doesn't care about the midterms, but from a purely self-interested level, it's like, dude, do you want to spend over $150 million in legal fees? Because you, Pete Hegseth, Mike Wall, all these other guys, like Elon, every potential mini scandal or any of this other thing, you are going to spend your ass living before Congress and adjudicating contempt and like subpoenas from the House of Representatives for your entire presidency. This is a tale as old as time from remember Benghazi and all this other nonsense that we were forced to live through. I mean, this is just classic waves of an administration. But I mean, the only alternative is this is what he believes, and there is just no shaking his foundational belief. Every once in a while, you're allowed to rush into the Oval Office and to cause a Trump truth or whatever that will implement a 90-day pause. By the way, where are the deals? I know I've been gone for a while, but every once in a while I check in. Where's the deal? I was told
you haven't missed much on that front.
Deal. I know I haven't. I'm aware. And it's my point. Every morning I check the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, at the very least, just checking for something. Even India, Japan, the European Union. In fact, it feels like every other country is doing better than we are. I just read this morning, European traders had their best year in a decade. And that foreign traders and others all trading off of the volatility and the currency shocks from the United States. So it seems like everybody else seems to be doing actually pretty well. I haven't seen like a major shock or actually politically. I know you guys are covering to Australia today. Yeah. It's like, oh, cool. It's like you're basically ushering in like global centrism. I'm sure that was definitely the project of the Trump administration. So it's just been a colossal failure, stupidity, ridiculous. And it would be funny if there were not millions of people to be affected. Like, I mean, the stroller thing is just a minute example, for someone like me. But I mean, it's only one of the most important periods of your entire life. And, just to think about people who are struggling, who are out there, who need a stroll. I've talked about this. You're not allowed to leave the hospital if you don't have a car seat. It's okay. Good luck. Over 94% of them come from China. So if you're having a kid 6 or 7 months from now, I know you're probably not thinking like this. I would buy one today. And, if you can't afford it or something like that in the future, you're going to have to try and buy secondhand. That's not really something that I want people to have to do. Right.
Yeah.
And so these are really bad things that you're inflicting on people's lives.
Yeah. And my view is, first of all, I think they just assume that the midterms are going to be a loss and it is what it is. And for Trump, I think, yes, he likes tariffs and he likes power, and tariffs give him the ultimate power.
Mm-hmm.
I think he even, the comments in the Time magazine interview, he was like sort of delighted that he had upended the election in Canada. He didn't care that it was in service of the opposite of his supposed ideological project. He just liked that it revolved around him. And I think that, he made other comments in that interview about how he's like controls the world effectively. And I think that's the way that he feels about it, is he loves making the whole world dance to his tune. And that's really, more than anything to me, what this is all about. But we did, as you mentioned before, we did get some new guidance from the dear leader about what sorts of toys and in what quantities and school supplies our children should be content with. Let's go ahead and take a listen to Trump on that.
You were at your cabinet meeting. You said, quote, I'm going to quote what you said, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30.
Yeah.
And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. Are you saying that your tariffs will cause some prices to go up?
No, I think the tariffs are going to be great for us because it's going to make us rich.
But you said some dolls are going to cost more. Isn't that an acknowledgement that some prices will go up?
I don't think a beautiful baby girl that's 11 years old needs to have 30 dolls. I think they can have 3 dolls or 4 dolls. Because what we were doing with China was just unbelievable. We had a trade deficit of hundreds of billions of dollars with China.
When you say they could have $3 instead of $30, are you saying Americans could see empty store shelves?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they don't need to have $30. They can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils. They can have 5.
5 pencils. Yeah. I guess the good news is the doll allotment has been increased from 2 to a max of 4. So yes, progress there.
Yeah, I mean, to borrow from Richard Hanania, like, this is MAGA Maoism. Like, this is literal Maoism. In terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about that because I saw a lot of people saying like this is like communism. But at least in communism, the idea was like you're going to take from the wealthier people and make everybody equal. This is like we're going to take from the poor to make the rich richer and like make sure that Donald Trump and his oligarchic cartel are, wildly wealthy. Although, I see you shaking your head. It is true that the billionaires are getting hurt here now too. Yeah. But the idea is if you're one of the insiders, you're going to be able to consolidate even more power, because who's going to get decimated by these tariffs? Amazon and Walmart, they're going to have a bumpy path. They're going to make it through. Small and medium-sized businesses, they're going to be destroyed.
I don't disagree. I was just going to say that actually was the net effect of the Soviet system, which is, everything's great, but actually IRL, what happens is a bunch of commissars and all those other people.
Fair.
So actually, I think the Mao analogy is accurate, because really what it was is that Maoism, the Cultural Revolution, and others, it used ideology. I've got a good Mao book behind me, actually, which was used as a tool of ideology to purge anybody who was not sufficiently worshiping the cult of personality around him, including some of the most effective people like Deng Xiaoping and others, while cultivating this era of stupidity where it was all supposed to be in service of like the great cultural revolution of the peasant class. And the net effect was like famine, while a lot of these other people either lived large or amassed large amounts of power. I think the Soviet system, very similar. So the stupidity and the corruption, within it is kind of baked in, I think, to the general ideology. But yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to is is this is antithetical, I think, to a lot of the not only the reasons why Trumpism, if there is such a thing, was popular. I mean, if we really do think about why Trump even won the overall election, people were not just upset about inflation or upset about immigration. I think in general, the American spirit has a lot of social libertarianism to it, where the idea is that we don't want to tell you what to do, just go ahead and live your life. We want to make everybody rich and or better off so that they can be able to do whatever it is they want to do. And so it's pretty different, whenever the president is telling you the number of pencils that your child is allowed to have at school, or the number of toys that you're allowed. Like, look, maybe he's right. Krystal, you know a lot better than I do. Maybe kids don't need a bunch of different Barbie dolls. But what if you want to buy it for him? Okay, what if I already know that if I have a daughter and she's 5 and she's asking me for a doll, if I have the money, it's happening. All right, that's probably a bad thing, but like I'm gonna buy it. And it's one of those where it's kind of grotesque, to be lectured by the leader of the country as to what you're allowed to spend your hard-earned money on. Now, just finally, because I know I've been beating this drum for a month, if we wanted to start a program of building children's toys, which are super safe with no lead, where we know exactly where they're made, and we're supporting like small businesses and people who are craftsmen and others who have been working on this for a long time, and it's somebody's dream, to be able to open a store and they get a tax credit and all that, I would be all for it. I would say that's fantastic. It's great. Let's get it out of China. Let's make sure that these are actually to a very, very high safety standard, unlike many children's toys that we have right now. But that's not what's happening, right? It's like instead you're just cutting off from them, and then you're not really helping anybody over here. And in fact, who's the best off? Like you said, it's Amazon and it's Walmart or any of these other places, which are just going to use loopholes to be able to stockpile inventory. Or, right now, Walmart is actually discounting, even though they're eating a ton of loss. Why? To nuke everybody else, because they can afford it. They have tons of cash on their balance sheet. Same with Amazon. I don't know if I talked about this on Wednesday. Amazon literally told its suppliers, we're not accepting price increases.
Right.
Which means what? You're screwed. If you're a supplier and you need to sell on Amazon, good luck to you, man. You're done. I'm already starting to see it. A few little products that I buy no longer available on Amazon.
Oh, wow. Really? Yeah. Listen, on the critique of consumerism, there is a version of this I'm open to, right? I wish we had a less sort of disposable society where, the number of toys and books and clothes and whatever that just gets like, basically tossed or taken to Goodwill or the op shop or whatever. There's, we don't really value having a few quality, perhaps locally made things. But that is not what we're talking about here, right? There's no other part of that agenda that exists. In fact, DOJ is making sure we don't have safety regulators to make sure there's no lead in the toys. They're rolling back the provisions with regard to toxic chemicals, et cetera. So yeah, it's just like suffering for the sake of Trumpian power plays. This is an interesting and sort of complicated one. Let's put this up on the screen. We've been covering Temu and Shein and their the way they're impacted by the tariff. So in addition to everything that's been done, Trump is now rolling back that de minimis loophole exemption that you have had your eye on for a while, Saagar, that basically lets these low-cost producers ship directly to consumers here in the U.S. And so long as the amount is under $800, they have been able to bypass any sort of customs, imports, duties, et cetera. That is being rolled back. It's going to have a huge impact on Temu and Shein, but also it's going to have a huge impact on Google and Meta and any sort of online platform that depends on ad revenue, because the numbers around this are quite astonishing. They'd flooded Google in the US with ads for the goods they sell. Those started to disappear from the platform in April. On April 5th, Temu accounted for 19% of all US ads. So almost 20% of all US ads displayed on Google Shopping. Now that number is zero. Shein also went from around 20% to zero by April 16th. So there will be significant reverberating effects, not just with Temu and Shein, but with the entire economy that revolves around advertising revenue, including yours truly.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah, good luck. Look, I'm for the de minimis thing. I'm for, Team Issue. I think they're bad. I just think they're empirically bad. I think they're bad for the American consumer. I think they're bad for the way that they use the de minimis loophole. It effectively does punish people in the U.S. But again, let's get back to the point. It's not about, the Temu and Shein, bad overnight, cut them off, good or not, let them stay. It's about plan. It's about the fact, like you just said, about advertising. It's like fast fashion, or making sure that people have access to bigger things or other things to be able to buy. There's like a cultural component, obviously, that the government can't get deeply involved in. But more broadly, the other thing with the Trump administration is you just never know if this is real or not. Like, is this part of some sort of concerted strategy? Because de minimis, we've covered here now for several months, has been on and off approximately 5 or 6 times. Mm-hmm. So if you're a company like, or anybody else who's thinking about like, oh my gosh, Temu or Shein is going away, maybe we can start, I'm trying to think, what was that brand called? American Apparel, something similar, like not fast fashion, but like a mid-tier fashion brand made in America. They had quite a bit of success, actually, if I recall. But the point is that if you wanted to bet, on building something here onshore, how do you know that overnight Temu and Shein are not going to be able to come back? Look at the TikTok thing. It's literally a piece of legislation that Trump just decided that he's not going to enforce. Whether you like this or not, this is a ridiculous way to make policy. And the whole point is that it just freezes investment all across the U.S. It punishes the U.S. consumer. They're seeing only things that are subtracted. There's nothing being added. There doesn't feel as if not only there's a steady, hand at the wheel, but they just generally are thrown into complete chaos. And that is just not really a way to live for people who are not, it sounds stupid about shopping or whatever, but, like you said, 20% reduction in Google ad spend, that has some pretty reverberating effects across the economy. Take us out of it. I mean, do you know how many, I would venture to say that almost every American who owns stock probably owns some share of Google. That's 50, 60%, whether you own it for the S&P 500 or not. Think about if you live in an area which relies on Google, they build, data centers or anything. So that's the other thing, is about the downstream overall economic effect of what this stuff looks like. Is there are 50th and 60th order consequences to just sucking all of this money out of the U.S. economy. And I think that's what I really object to here.
Griffin was saying it'd be pretty ironic if Trump ends up destroying the U.S. podcast class.
Yeah,
that's
ad hilarious.
That would be kind of funny.
I mean, it's funny though, because I think they would probably still be fine. Unfortunately, the sports gambling industry is still roaring, and they're the ones who are really propping them up, along with discount Crypto Viagra pills. So I don't think those are going anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to wait for the next Maoist move from Trump to go after those industries. All right, let's go ahead and take a listen to the guy who runs the port in LA, because there is perhaps no one who would have his finger on the pulse more of what is headed our way, and more importantly, what is not headed our way right now. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what he has to say.
About a third of the import volume, which means give or take about 50,000 20-foot equivalent units gone off the arrivals coming in next week.
From next week is when you expect to see this really hit?
That's correct. And that matches up. The announcement's back on April 2nd. Then on April 8th, a little bit of a change on everybody, ex-China, Mexico, Canada. And those arrivals are coming at us this weekend.
We'll, of course, dedicate time to your port, but I'm just wondering how you're anticipating this rolls and ripples through the economy from here, how it hits trucking, when this turns up on the shelf. What's the distance, the time from when you see a drop-off in volume and when we, as consumers, see the shortages?
Right. So CEOs are telling me, hit the pause button, right? I'm not going to import anymore at these kind of prices. Let's wait and see. I don't know if it's going to be 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 weeks till I get some clarity. Then hiring. Off the table for right now. Capital investment, pause. And the retailers are telling me that realistically, with even the 10%, I'm going to have to pass it on to the consumers.
So how much is this really coming from all over? It's not just about China. This is about really global trade coming to a standstill until there is a much greater degree of certainty and a much lower tariff rate than even the baseline that's been put out there.
Yeah, when I was last with you all, Lisa, I said global trade's going to slow, economies will follow, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Back in November, so many of us were wringing our hands about 4% inflation. We've just added 10 percentage points to imports coming out of Southeast Asia for our port, and these unbelievable numbers out of China.
How much are you going to see a real decline in dock workers if this goes on?
Yeah, this is the question. So the trucker hauling 4 or 5 containers today, next week, she probably hauls 2 or 3. The dock workers are no longer going to see overtime and double shifts. They're going to probably work less than a traditional work week, starting right off the bat. Every 4 containers mean a job. So when we start dialing this back, it's less job opportunities.
And what happens if we get a deal?
If we get a deal, it's going to take about a month. Let me walk you through that real quick. About 2 weeks to get the ships repositioned around these major ports, from Qingdao to Shanghai to Xiamen, load up all those containers, and then another 2 weeks to steam across the Pacific to get to us. This is important because now we're talking about spring and summer fashion. So we're kind of at a crux here that we've got to have something pretty quick.
And back to school, which
That's
is going
right.
to be, I think, very critical when it comes to political pushback for this administration.
It's interesting what he says there, not just about the timing, but he's like, we're not just talking about China here. And, let's just put Arnaud up before I get your reaction to all of this, Saagar, who was talking about, Japan. Originally, the idea was that we're going to have this grand encirclement strategy. We were going to use Japan to agree to this, to help to isolate China. Fast forward to today, Japan is so antagonized, they're publicly calling U.S. proposals absolutely unacceptable and are threatening for the first time ever and on national TV to sell their holdings of U.S. treasuries as a tool of economic warfare against the U.S. In other words, a policy intended to isolate China is achieving the exact opposite outcome.
Yes. I was flagging a lot. I could see this coming from a mile away. I saw the Japanese prime minister in the parliament, and I was like, man, this is not good whenever you start hearing that type of rhetoric. These are very careful and reserved people. They know exactly what they're doing. That also is an indication not only of how they're feeling it at the governmental level, but broadly how they're seeing, being able to push back against the U.S. as a democratic thing, which has really not happened in a long time in Japan. It's very isolating, and so not only is it about a failure of policy, but it also does show you that the amount of uncertainty now injected into global trade is such that the overall effect for the U.S. consumer, it takes months to shake out. I think the most interesting part of the Port of LA CEO there was him saying, even if there was a pause on everything, that it would still take a month for it to come back. So, what is that, like a lost quarter of overall U.S. GDP? Like, that's a lot. And we just had the negative print on the number. And it's a little complicated. And I know you guys have talked about that in terms of, because a big part of it is a number of imports and things like that. So it's not perhaps as catastrophic as people may think, but I'm very curious to see what that next figure looks like with this overall drop in trade. And I also feel for a lot of those dock workers, truck workers, and others, people who really, they were going through it already. It's already in terms of the decline, but, trucking, what is it? The number one industry for non-college educated men in the U.S. to be able to earn over $100,000 per year. It's one of the reasons it's the most popular industry. You get paid a decent amount of money. You get to set relatively some of your own hours. You have a decent amount of freedom. This is just, it takes it away from you. And that's financially devastating, for people. Yeah. And then you're going to have to start looking at other things.
I wish I could remember the numbers, but the percent of people who live in and around LA who are somehow employed by the port ecosystem is just massive.
It's huge.
And obviously, LA is the biggest port in the country, but Oakland is also huge. We have a number that would be massively impacted. And frankly, I think a month to, let's say there's a deal, the executive director there of the Port of LA saying it would take a month to sort of shake things out. Based on COVID, I feel like that's kind of optimistic. Because
totally.
There were so many reverberating impacts that, because once the truckers aren't getting enough work, then they leave and they go to other jobs, and then you don't have enough truckers, and then, the dock where there's whole compounding impacts that are hard to anticipate in advance. So I feel like a month is kind of a best case scenario, assuming that everything goes relatively smoothly in being able to unwind all of this. 2 quick indications here before we move on to Warren Buffett. We can put up McDonald's on the screen, burger chains, saying that tariffs are hurting sales after reporting largest decline since the pandemic. Apparently also they're kiosk situation in the stores is also a big flop, which I would agree with. It takes so much freaking longer to order on those dang kiosks than just telling someone your order. So please bring back the human beings. In addition, Apple, they say that the tariffs could cost them $900 million, so almost $1 billion just this quarter. And Tim Cook says there's actually some extraordinary factors that make that number less this quarter than it could be in quarters moving forward. And Saagar, remember, Apple is one of the companies that has been a beneficiary of some of the larger exemptions to the tariff policy. So this is also being seen as a pretty dire indicator.
Yeah, well, I think one of you guys said it was like, this is one of the best managed companies in the world with a shit ton of balance sheet cash, and they're global experts at trade navigation and all of this. And for them to be ripping $1 billion a quarter, that's not a joke. Not only in terms of their inventory and how difficult it will be for them to navigate, but I think the point was, now multiply that by the average Fortune 500 CEO, and you're like, oh, well, if this is one of the best companies in the whole world, then just think about what that's going to mean for so many others. I don't know.
Yeah, because they had already shifted. They had already shifted a significant amount to India and Vietnam, I believe. So they were sort of anticipating this, and even so, and got their exemptions because they're politically connected, and even so, taking this kind of a hit.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.